Hey everybody, and welcome to this introductory episode of Hey AstroDoc. I'm Dr. Rex Saffer, and I am the AstroDoc. I'm also a little anal retentive, and to prove it, let's have a look at the outline I prepared for this episode. First, and only in this episode, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and how I arrived at this sad state of affairs. After that, we'll move on to the three program segments I have for us. In What's Up, AstroDoc, I'll present current news items of interest, at least to me. Then in the Astro Factoid segment, I'll describe something I came across in our vast, fascinating universe that made me say, I didn't know that. Finally, I'll let my inner bad boy out and brutally excoriate some person, social or cultural group, or institution, especially our recently elected government officials, who deliberately and systematically spread disinformation or outright lies, engage in shameless hypocrisy, or exhibit exceptional cowardice. And now this disclaimer. Some language in these episodes will be entirely inappropriate for small children. I'll end by asking you to suggest future subject matter or for suggestions on how these videos can be made better. Well, as I just threatened, let me try to condense the last 50 years of my life down into a couple of minutes. I graduated high school in 1969, and shortly thereafter I began a 10-year period of service in the United States Air Force as an avionics technician on F-4 fighter jets. I then left the Air Force and began my undergraduate studies at the University of Utah in Salt Lake City, where in 1985 I received dual Bachelor of Science degrees in physics and mathematics. I then continued on to graduate studies at the University of Arizona in Tucson, and in 1991 I received my PhD in astronomy and astrophysics. I then was awarded a 5-year postdoctoral fellowship at the Space Telescope Science Institute on the campus of the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. The Institute is the agency that operates the Hubble Space Telescope, as well as more recently the James Webb Space Telescope. I was there in the beginning of Hubble's activities, and it was a very exciting time for me. I had marvelous opportunities to work with the Hubble and to publish the papers on my research in refereed journals. At the end of the fellowship, I joined the faculty at the Villanova University Department of Astronomy of Astrophysics, where for the next 10 years I conducted independent research, taught in the classroom, and also worked with the University IT department as a scientific and computing liaison with other professors in departments that were conducting research of their own. I left the university, and for the next 3 years, I worked in the private IT sector with a managed services provider for local area nonprofits. I finally got back into the classroom at the physics department at Camden County College in Blackwood, New Jersey, where I taught courses until I finished out my career about 2.5 years ago, and I'm fully retired now. So what am I doing in my retirement? Well, I spend a lot of time playing and teaching bridge, the card game. But over the years, I've developed deep interests in topics like philosophy, metaphysics, theology, physical and cultural anthropology, the evolution of life on Earth and the evolution of the human species. I also am a trained musician. I play the classical guitar and I'm a trained a cappella ensemble singer. Over the years, I've written essays on these and other topics and shared some of them with a circle of friends and published others to a blog I maintain at medium.com. I've supplied a link to that blog in the episode description below. Well, I'm sure that's more than enough about me, and I promise never to inflict that upon you again. So what's up next? Well, why don't we go back to our episode outline and find out. Well, our first regular episode segment, What's Up, AstroDoc, is What's Up Next. Now, I usually will want to present a variety of current events in this spot, but as this episode is being recorded, some recent developments call for a change of plans. So today is February 7th, Friday, and last Tuesday, the Senate Finance Committee voted 14-13 along strict party lines to advance the nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as Secretary of Health and Human Services to the full Senate, with a vote to be scheduled next week. So for this episode, I've decided to stick with just this one issue. Let's have a look. Before we proceed, I need to define a little bit of terminology. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to refer to the current occupant of the White House far more often than I would like. In fact, pronouncing his name induces a bit of mild nausea in me. But when I have to do so, this is what I'll say: Donald F. Trump. Now, I know that all of us know his middle initial is not F, but I can't help thinking about him any other way. Donald effing Trump. So when I must say it, it'll be Donald F. Trump. But most of the time, I'll just abbreviate it down to DFT. All right, with that, let's move on. Here's our one item for the week, and I've entitled it, So What the F is Up with RFK Jr.? So let's start with an article from the New York Post, a right-wing mouthpiece, we must say. Back in November of 2024, and in this article, they wrote, putting RFK in charge of health breaks the first rule of medicine. Well, that rule is, first, do no harm. And the Post is certain that RFK breaks this rule. In fact, they continued, we came out thinking he's nuts on a lot of fronts. Well, even before that, presidential candidate DFT in April of 2024 called him a radical left lunatic and proclaimed that no Republican can vote for this guy. And indeed, in the New York Post article cited here on January 27th of this year, they agree nothing has changed about Kennedy. He's still a radical left lunatic. No Republican can vote for this guy. No senator should. But let's recall that an equally, if not more unqualified Pete Hegseth was recently confirmed as Secretary of Defense. So it's hard to tell what's going to happen, but I suspect that with Senator Cassidy's capitulation recently, he rolled over, that I suspect that RFK is going to be confirmed. So this Post, reliably right-wing mouthpiece, why are they so opposed to RFK's confirmation? Well, a lot, if not most of everything he says has some degree of falsity to it. And here he is in his own words. Back in 2020, flu shots transmit the flu. In fact, if you get a flu shot, you're 6 times more likely to give somebody the flu. Nonsense. Poppycock. Bilge water. You cannot transmit the flu from a flu shot because they don't contain live virus. And even nasal vaccines have a weakened virus. Neither one has ever been shown to transmit the flu, but that doesn't stop RFK from making ridiculous statements like this, does it? Again, in the same interview, they had a pertussis vaccine that was causing brain injury in 1 out of every 300 people. Not so. A reputable study, of course, which RFK would discard, and this is in the Journal of the American Medical Association, found only 9 documented incidents of brain injury in 100,000 DPT vaccinations. But pertussis, which is known as the whooping cough, can be fatal to children. And other diseases are just as dangerous, and vaccination prevents them in children and prevents children from dying. Finally, in a recent interview with Lex Fridman, who, by the way, if you ever want to see an outstanding podcast, look this guy up. None of the 72 vaccines mandated for our children had a placebo-controlled trial. False again. Some were tested against a placebo. But even those that weren't, vaccinate against dangerous diseases. So, as I write here, it is malignantly and manifestly unethical to deny children protection against a dangerous pathogen or treatment for it by giving them a placebo in a controlled trial. But apparently ethics doesn't stop some people from making false statements. And that means it's time for our second episode segment. So let's get back to our episode outline and see what that might be. Okay, our second segment is our weekly astrofactoid. And I was looking through some science articles, as I do from time to time, and came across this one. Why do bats hang upside down? And I said to myself, I did not know that. Why do bats hang upside down? So let's have a look. So, what we're looking at is 2 fruit bats. Now, it turns out that there are over 1,000 species of bats. In fact, the only mammal with more species are rodents. And of the 1,000 species of bats, about a little under 200 are what we would call fruit bats, or sometimes called flying foxes. These are bats that are typically found in tropical regions, rainforests and such, where there are a lot of fruit trees, and that gives them a lot of food to eat. All right, so 2 fruit bats or flying foxes. The other 800 or so species are insect-eating bats, many of which are found in North America. And here's an example of one carrying off a prize for dinner. It's a centipede. And you'll note that although the fruit bats, let's take a look at them again, are kind of cute. If you look at them upside down, their little faces almost look like maybe doggy faces. But not so with our insect-eating bats. Most of them are remarkably ugly. And this one is no exception. So there you have it. These are the two main subspecies of bats. So I found out about this in a recent Live Science news magazine article, and again, I'll provide links below in the episode description. By the way, I forgot to mention that there were several highlighted items in the WTF RFK segment, and those highlighted sources will also have links supplied down in the episode description. But to move on, I read Live Science quite a bit. It's a good magazine, digital news magazine. And one of their staff writers, Charles Choi, interviewed one Tara Hohoff, who is a bat biologist and runs the Illinois Bat Conservation Program, and another bat researcher, Alexander Lewis, at California State Polytech in Humboldt, California, regarding what I consider to be a pendulous problem. So it turns out that anatomical function, or parts that provide a function, can evolve across different species from different structures, and wings are one of these types of what is called convergent evolution. I should remark that eyes are another example of convergent evolution. Mammalian eyes, like ours, have evolved from brain tissue. But the octopus also has eyes which are structurally very similar to ours, but they evolved out of skin tissue. But something was needed. An eye was needed, and nature found a way to evolve it from two different types of tissue. So whenever two structures independently evolve from different ancestors, they're called homologous. And wings are these homologous structures. Now, the big difference is that birds grow feathers out of the skin covering their arm bones. And as you can see from the illustration, their arm bones look, somewhat like ours. They have a humerus and the two little radial bones above the wrist. So they're remarkably similar in structure, although shaped differently. But bat hands are completely different. And that's because their wings are formed from skin itself, stretched between these incredibly elongated finger bones. So that's the primary difference between bat and bird wings, is the way they're structured. One is feathers from skin, and the other is skin stretched over these big fingers. The other big difference is that bat bones are mammal bones, and so they're filled with marrow, just like ours. But bird bones are largely hollow, filled with hair, although they do have this crisscrossing structure of struts which serves to make their bones rigid. So we do have an example of not a flying, but a gliding mammal today, and it's a flying squirrel. These squirrels climb up big tall trees and then jump and spread their arms and their legs out, and they've got skin stretched between them, and they can glide very efficiently, remarkably well, to a tree which may be 100 meters away. And bats may have evolved in the same way, that they might have climbed trees and started out gliding, but developed their wing structures in a completely different manner. So the point is that because of the bone structure mostly, bats and birds can be approximately the same size, but bats are going to weigh a lot more than birds do because of their solid bone structure. And so it makes it more difficult for them to jump up off of the ground to get flying. So they may have evolved this habit of hanging upside down because of that, because it's a lot easier to just drop yourself down from hanging and then go right into flight. So what makes this possible is the structure of the bat's legs and muscles and tendons and talons in those legs. So we've got muscles that can extend and contract our fingers, for example. So if I put my arm up here, let me see if I can get my elbow up. Okay. So I've got two motions I can make. I can curl my fingers shut. And to do that, there's a muscle down here below the arm that contracts and pulls those fingers in. But I have another muscle up here, which when it contracts, straightens my fingers out. Bats have this muscle, but not this one. When they contract this muscle, their claws extend. Well, how do they get them to grip these perches or branches that they hang from? Well, that's because of the tendon structure in the bat leg. As soon as the bat gets its talons even close to being wrapped around the branch here, they simply relax, and the claws close automatically around the branch by the weight of the bat pulling on the tendons. So it's a wonderful adaptation, and I just found it fascinating. It's one of those things that when I read through the article, it made me say, I didn't know that. And so I thought I'd share it with you. Okay, once again, let's get back to our episode outline and see what our third episode segment is going to look like. Okay, our third and last segment took aim at evangelical Christians this week. However, I've been looking at the episode link so far, and it's running up around 25 minutes, and I really would like to keep these episodes to about 20 minutes each so that I don't lose viewers from sheer boredom or exhaustion. So I'm going to defer the discussion of that topic, and we'll work it into our next episode. So finally, I'd like to thank you very much for viewing this episode. Please look down in the episode description for the resources I used for this week's episode. And I also solicit from you anything you have to suggest for me, either for future topical material or suggestions to make these videos better. And I'd love to hear from you. And please leave a comment down below, and I promise that I'll read it and I'll answer you.